The theory of innate ideas is a philosophical concept suggesting that certain ideas, knowledge, or concepts are inborn and not derived from experience. According to this theory, humans are born with some inherent knowledge or cognitive structures that shape their understanding of the world. This idea contrasts with empiricism, which asserts that all knowledge comes from sensory experience. Key features of the theory of innate ideas. Innate knowledge. The central claim of the theory is that some knowledge is not acquired through experience but is part of the human mind from birth. These ideas are inherent, or natural, to humans, suggesting that the mind comes pre-equipped with certain truths or principles. Universal ideas. The theory often implies that these innate ideas are universal across all humans, regardless of their upbringing, culture, or environment. For example, the concepts of logic, morality, or mathematics might be considered innate because they appear to be understood universally. Rationalist tradition. The theory of innate ideas is often associated with rationalism, which is the view that reason, rather than sensory experience, is the primary source of knowledge. Rationalist philosophers argue that the mind is equipped with innate ideas that help us make sense of the world, independent of experience. Historical background. Plato. The idea of innate knowledge can be traced back to Plato. In his dialogues, Plato suggested that knowledge is not something we acquire through learning but something we remember from a time before birth. In his work Meno, Plato describes how Socrates helps a slave boy remember mathematical truths that he had never been taught, implying that knowledge of abstract concepts like geometry is innate and part of the soul's prior existence. René Descartes. The theory of innate ideas was most notably developed by René Descartes in the 17th century. Descartes argued that certain ideas, such as the idea of God, the concept of mathematical truths, and even some basic principles of logic, are innate and not derived from sensory experience. Descartes famously said, "Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am," which he believed was an example of an innate idea. The very notion of thought and existence is inherent in the mind. John Locke's critique. One of the most famous criticisms of the theory of innate ideas came from John Locke, an empiricist philosopher. In his work An Essay Concerning Human Understanding, 1690, Locke argued that the mind at birth is a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and all knowledge is derived from experience. He rejected the notion of innate ideas, claiming that knowledge comes solely from sensory perception and reflection on those perceptions. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, a rationalist, offered a refined version of the theory of innate ideas. He argued that certain ideas, like principles of logic or basic mathematical truths, are inherent in the human mind, but they are not fully formed at birth. Instead, these ideas are in a latent form and must be uncovered through experience and intellectual development. Key examples of innate ideas: mathematical and logical principles, concepts like numbers, geometry, or basic logic, e.g., the law of non-contradiction, are often cited as examples of innate ideas. These ideas seem to be universally recognized and independent of cultural or experiential differences. Moral and ethical ideas. Some theorists propose that basic moral concepts, such as the notion of right and wrong or justice, are innate to human beings, not learned from society but rather inherent to human nature. Concept of God. Descartes, for example, claimed that the idea of God is innate, suggesting that humans are born with an understanding of a perfect, infinite being. Criticism of the theory of innate ideas. 1. Empirical objections. Empiricists like Locke argue that the theory of innate ideas is speculative and lacks empirical evidence. 1. They suggest that all knowledge comes from sensory experience and that the mind is not preloaded with ideas but instead builds knowledge from interactions with the world. 2. Lack of clear definition. Critics also argue that the theory is vague about what exactly constitutes an innate idea, and how these ideas manifest in the mind. 2. If these ideas are innate, Why don't they appear clearly in the mind from birth? 2. Why do people need to develop them over time? 3. Cultural variation. Another criticism is that the diversity of beliefs and knowledge across cultures suggests that ideas are shaped by experience and culture rather than being universally inherent. 3. If innate ideas were truly universal, we would expect more consistency in the fundamental knowledge people have across different societies. Conclusion: the theory of innate ideas has been an influential topic in philosophy, especially within the context of the rationalism versus empiricism debate. While rationalist philosophers like Plato, Descartes, and Leibniz championed the idea of inborn knowledge, empiricists like Locke rejected it, arguing that all knowledge comes from sensory experience. Despite criticisms, the idea of innate ideas continues to provoke philosophical discussions on the nature of knowledge, the mind, and human understanding.